Okay, good morning, committee, and welcome. Got my glasses, but I'm going to save these for a little bit later. I would like to call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. Confirm that members are here and confirm that we do have quorum. For those sitting in the audience and attending online, we do have a counselor online as well. So this continues to be a hybrid situation. I'd like to confirm also that our CAO, clerk, and members of our senior management team are here and present. Continue to advise the public that if you do have input, to please send your email to the following address: tmlpubliccomment@muskokalakes.ca. I'll just note that we have none on today's agenda. A reminder that today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka Lakes website and YouTube channel. By participating in the open public meeting today, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. There is no supplementary agenda, so at this point, I would like to ask committee if there's any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none. Final quick explanation again for those in the audience. Motions have been pre-populated with random movers and seconders to expedite this meeting. And voting, if members shall physically raise their hand until the chair has confirmed the vote. If the vote is unclear, a verbal vote shall be recorded. This is not considered a recorded vote. So that takes us through the intro and the admin. And at this point, I'd like to welcome to the floor our delegations for today. So our first delegation, item 4A, is Mr. Owen Allerton.
Thank you.
He's joining us via Zoom. Welcome, Mr. Allerton. I like your festive background.
Thank you very much. I thought it would be the best way to position things for given the season.
Fantastic. You have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Is the presentation materials I provided up on a screen you can see?
Not quite yet, but we will get that.
Okay, thanks so much. So
I'll let you know when it's up. What, just so that we start you at the appropriate time here.
Okay, thanks.
And there you go.
Perfect. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much to the mayor and council and everyone present for taking the time to hear me. My name is Owen Allerton. Myself and my wife, Nikki, operate Highland Cannabis. We are an independent licensed cannabis retailer in Kitchener, Ontario. We're proud members of our community. We're not what most people expect when they think of cannabis retailer. I'm a BBA grad from Laurier. I worked at BlackBerry for 13 years, Rogers Wireless before that. We opened our store, it'll be 3 years ago in January, and we climbed up to being #1 in our region and then top 10 in the province, and we've stayed there ever since. And we've done this by operating with integrity and professionalism and a focus on our local community. We've won awards for our employment practices. We have 25 full-time employees in our one shop. We're members of the Chamber, the CFIB, and the Better Business Bureau. But I wanted to come to you today to share with you sort of an updated look at the market and what has happened in the 3 years since Ontario went open license. And we all saw and heard about the stories of cannabis stores everywhere. And a lot has changed because 3 years ago, simply being a professional in this industry, someone coming from BlackBerry, was enough to grab headlines, as you can see. And if we can go to the next slide. But what has happened since then, and what I can confidently say now, the gold rush is absolutely over. 4 years ago, there was no information out there about how stores would do, what the opportunity was. The only thing that existed, the only info to go on, was these crazy stories from the first 50 lottery winners that were, because there were so few stores and just 50 who had won the lottery, they were making a lot of money. And what you saw from that was a huge influx of people seeing dollar signs and a literal gold rush. And I think you saw that in your municipality and neighboring ones like Gravenhurst, Huntsville.
We'll just pause for a moment, the timer.
on downtown Kitchener was filled with a store, but that was very much because people got excited and they didn't know what to expect. The reality of the markets kicked in, and there has been a real cleanup. Some interesting information there. Of over 350 municipalities that have opted in, there's been almost 2,000 retail license applications. But what we call the Great Purge or the Green Wedding, referencing Game of Thrones, the industry is cleaning itself up. We are down to around 1,300 stores that remain open today, and myself and many industry experts expect that to go even lower, down to the 1,000 mark. And the key to this is a business. This is a professional business like any others. And what you see left are professional operators that know what they're doing. And as a proof point, I'd offer up Mississauga. They finally opted in this past April, so about 6 months ago. And to date, there's only been 45 retail license applications for that entire municipality. I had personally thought, based on the experience from 4 years ago, we would have seen more like 200 to 300 applications on a per capita adjusted rate. But the industry has calmed down. People know what to expect. There's much better information out there now. So fears that perhaps everything is going to be overrun and you'd have a repeat of Gravenhurst, that time is past. People know what it takes in this industry now, and it's the good folks surviving. If we could go to the last slide. So what I would bring to you in my ask today is if the Township of Muskoka Lakes would reconsider. My wife and I would love to fulfill a vision and dream of opening a store in the township. What we've done in Kitchener is open the store, as I mentioned, has over 20 full-time positions. We offer full benefits to employees. We've been an active member of the community through the chamber. And the interesting tidbit, too, is that the majority of our customers are between the ages of 40 and 70. And products that people smoke, what you might think of when you talk about cannabis, is less than half of what we sell. CBD products, topicals, this sort of thing is a huge piece of this. And another really interesting insight too, and as someone who we own property up there and we love the community, what we've noticed in the city is that people will go where they need to go to pick up these products, and they'll do all their shopping there. So people will make trips out of the Township of Muskoka Lakes to other places where they've got their LCBO grocery store and whatnot. We would love to be able to bring that to the region and figure out how we can keep all their shopping in one spot. So thank you very much. I think that's 5 minutes.
That was fantastic. That was 5 minutes. Thank you. Fantastic from a timing standpoint. Good presentation as well. Sorry. I was about to put my hand up and say, so thanks for clarifying that. So committee, just a reminder, Mr. Allerton, how this will work is committee will ask any questions they may have of you now. And then you'll note that later on in the agenda, that's the time when we will talk about any next steps that may come out of today's delegation. So committee, just a reminder to right now is not for discussion, it's for questions. So with that, committee members, are there any questions for Mr. Allerton? Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Allerton. Just a quick one. Your presentation is very good. I understand the story. If you had your choice, though, would you prefer to have a store in or a location in the Muskoka Lakes area or in Gravenhurst or Bracebridge, like in terms of size of the community? Just wondering what your thoughts on that were.
Personally, I would love to have one in the Township of Muskoka Lakes. We've had a cottage on Taylor Island for 15 years. We have one on Bass Lake as well. We love the area. We're in this for the long term. So I have 3 children. They're 11, 12, 13, and making sure there's safe supply and so on is very important for them. But they'll be off at university soon enough. I would love to have something that it can operate full time for the next 15 to 20 years. Up there in the region on the lakes. And that's where we'd love to be. I mean, we are part of the community where we love going into Port Carling and into Bala, and it's a much more onerous trip to get all the way over to Huntsbridge or Braceville. You lose a whole day when you do something like that. So I would love to be much closer to the area. And I think a lot of other people on the lake and around the lakes would love to avoid having to go to those other municipalities as well.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. And through you, not so much to the presenter, but I guess to staff, to our clerk. So just so other people understand, we did bring, another counselor and myself brought this forward for this discussion today. And although it is indicated lower down on our agenda, I was wondering why the resolution that we had put into place wasn't in the public domain, just again, for people who aren't aware. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. It was simply put on because it was a delegation matter. We do have it prepared and ready to put on the floor today, but it was only because we just followed the process for the delegation matter, but we have it ready for you.
Okay. Thank you. Mayor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you. I just have a quick question. I'm not sure this is the appropriate time to ask it, but assuming we were to move forward with this, I'm curious to know what ability the township has to regulate locations, number of stores, proximity to, and I don't know that Mr. Allerton is the right person to ask, and I don't know if it's something we know intuitively or we'd have to go back and do some homework on it, but I'd be curious to know that.
Okay, Director Pink, are you on the call? Is that something that you could help us?
I can add some comment too, if you would like.
Sure. Just wait. I'd like to hear from staff first, if I could. Director Pink?
Good morning, committee. To be honest with you, I would have to refresh my memory on the regulations. It sounds like the delegate might know more information off the top of his head. Certainly, what I can say is that any proposed storefront would have to be on a property zoned to permit a retail use, but I would have to do a bit more investigation as to whether that can be refined further with respect to this particular use. But typically what you'd be looking at is C3 zones, which is the downtown commercial quarters of Val and Port Carling would permit retail stores.
Thank you. And I think CAO Hammond would like to comment.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And in addition to the zoning requirements, I believe there's also provincial locational requirements. And so should committee wish to proceed to explore the matter further, that will be included in a staff report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bosemworth.
Thank you. I was just wondering if one of staff could give us a brief history of what happened when it came to council last time and what was the rationale for not allowing it.
So I'm trying to, is Director Pink back on the call? Or okay, just for clarification, the resolution that has been drafted will include the request for staff to come back with that type of information. So
yep, thanks.
I think I just answered the question, Director Pink. So okay, committee, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none. So Mr. Allerton, I think you probably have a good sense as to what's happening next here is that there is a draft resolution and that will be read later today and committee will have a further discussion at that point. In addition, our clerk will follow up with you and let you know what the outcome of today's discussion was. So you don't have to feel like you have to sit around for the next couple of hours if you don't want to. Okay.
Thank you very much for your time and for hearing me today.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Okay. Mr. Elliott and Mr. Walter, item 4B. Snowmobile. Yes, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for having us.
Is that on? I think we have to turn the mic on.
Talk about the snow again? No. Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair, and to the committee. Thanks so much for having us today. My name is Steve Elliott. I'm the president of the Muskoka Lakes Snow Trails Association, the local snowmobile club in the area, and I have with me today Steve Walter, who is our vice president. Can we get the slides up, please? That'd be great. I heard the time doesn't start until my slides are up. So again, thanks very much for having us today. There's a main purpose for our visit here today. First of all, is to perhaps re-educate, talk about the snowmobile club, the impact that we have in the district, in the township. There's a recent economic report that we sent out in advance of this. We'll touch base on that. But really what we're here today to do is to ask for support from the township Both Steve and myself are relatively new in terms of running this club, taking it over the last couple of years. We're really trying to have a rebirth of the club to improve snowmobiling in the area, and collaboration with the township and the district is critical to our operations. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. The next slide, please. So I don't like to read, so you guys can read that. I'll tell you some other great facts about snowmobiling. There's 85,000 households in Ontario that snowmobile. And according to the recent study that was done, 7,000 of those households actually ride in the district of Muskoka as their primary place they ride. In terms of our district, we're called District 7. We are in the top 4 destinations for all of Ontario. The people close to us, Parry Sound and Huntsville, and Haliburton are the other main areas that people ride. So this central area of Ontario, no surprise, is the main area where people ride. 65% of our riders earn over $100,000 a year. And 90% of the people that responded indicated that they don't just snowmobile alone, they snowmobile with their families. They snowmobile with their children, with their grandchildren, with their spouses. So hopefully you can see it's a pretty significant number of people that snowmobile. If you don't do it, I highly recommend you try it. But it's certainly, there's a lot of people that do that in the Muskoka area. Our current club is made up of 10 volunteers. We've got some great, 10 board members. We've got some great volunteers, but essentially there are 10 of us that run this club. And candidly, about 3 or 4 of us that are really kind of the lifeblood of the operation. In terms of how it works, if somebody's riding a snowmobile, they buy a trail permit for the year. It's about $230. That money goes to the provincial organization called the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs. They then allocate that money based on need. So they pay for our groomer, they pay for the fuel in our groomer, but they don't pay for anything else. So when we have to buy chainsaws to go out, and cut down trees and clear trails, or we have to do minor bridge repairs, all of that comes from our individual fundraising. A couple of years ago, when I took over the club, we had $500 in the bank account. So we were almost out of money. We've done a great job of improving that, but we still have a long way to go. Next slide, please. In terms of the economic impact, there's a lot of stuff on here. This is a report that just came out this year. It's a couple of weeks old in terms of being released. I'm not going to go into all of it, but this is just for District 7. So this is the area of Muskoka that I'm talking about. It estimates $126 million a year in economic impact. And from a tax perspective, even at the municipal level, $2.5 million in taxes. When we look at what we do and why we do it, we don't just do it for snowmobiling because we love to snowmobile. We do it for the businesses that are also on this slide right here. You took all these businesses, either support us, we support them, vice versa. These are all the restaurants, gas stations, businesses in the area that have told us time and time again that they desperately need winter tourism. And if snowmobiling goes away, they have extreme concerns that the viability of their businesses could be in jeopardy because they don't have all that business that's coming to them. Drive by Balla Falls Pub, Bass Lake Restaurant, you'll see all the snowmobiles out there, spending on average $250, $260 a day for each rider in those local businesses, according to the survey. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Walter, and he'll talk to you about some of our successes and challenges.
In my minute and a half I have left.
Yes.
Next slide, please. So I'm not going to touch too much on our successes and opportunities, other than to say that, when we took over the club several years ago, it was really a one-man operation before. And what we've really tried to do is just bring new life to the club, and really focus on community and tourist engagement in our area, supporting local business. Next slide, please. So this is what brings us to our ask of council. And I tried to break it down into maybe just 3 main areas. We found that we've had a challenge when it comes to collaborating with the township and district. And not necessarily that they don't want to work with us. It's just that, we have never presented in front of committee before. So when I make a phone call and say, hey, look, I need help, clearing a snowbank, or I need help, fixing a trail or some brushing in a certain area, they're very apprehensive to work with us. And that's the reason why we come here today, so that we can start opening up those lines of communications and they feel comfortable working with the club. I'll be the first one to say that the club has done things in the past that probably, we shouldn't have. And I think, going forward, we just want to make sure we do the right things. The second thing is, when it comes to things like bylaw amendments and requests, we just want to see ease of access there. We've had some challenges in Balla when it comes to road allowances, sidewalks. We're running into a challenge right now with a one-way street that's going to cut off some access to businesses such as Balla Pub, Balla Bay Inn, Lakeside or Lakeview.
So just kind of close it up. I can see it's on the screen.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Last thing.
Sorry.
So budget ask, we figure as far as running the club, we'd be looking for $20,000 a year. We didn't really want to put a number to anything, but when we figure, we're working on shoestring budgets, that we would ask for a budget ask of $20,000 a year to the club. And then the long-term goal, we just need something that we can call home. The district of Muskoka was very gracious to provide a 5-year land lease for us for land. Going forward, we need something that is a permanent structure that we can work out of, somewhere we can house the groomer, keep it, warm at night so that it's not a frozen block of ice, and somewhere that we can actually have our board meetings and so forth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So just like our last delegation, I'll open up the floor for questions. And then I believe that we will be having this conversation a little bit later in the meeting today. So committee, with that, are there any questions? Councillor Nishikawa, Mayor Kelly.
Thank you. Through you to one of the speakers. How much snowmobiling did you get in last year?
I personally did
No,
five.
sorry. I want to say locally as well, just so.
Right. So me personally, because I operate the trails as well, I'm considered the trail boss. I had 500 kilometers of access to the trails on a snowmobile prior to anyone even accessing the trail. My machine last year, I believe I had 2,200 kilometers put on that specific machine. And then we went for a trip up to Sudbury and did another 1,000 kilometers in a weekend.
Thank you. I think for me personally, I'm actually trying to understand the time frame. Like, is it 2 weeks? Like it seemed like there was very little snowmobiling possible last winter in particular.
Last year our trails opened. I got out grooming on December the 24th on Christmas Eve when we had that snowstorm, started packing trails. We opened our trails, I believe January 28th. And it was one of the worst years that we've seen. We had no frost in the ground. 4 years prior to that was one of the best seasons we've seen in years. We were running all the lakes up here. We were running the trails. We still had snowmobiles on the trail like till April, first week of April or so. So it really depends on our frost levels, how much cold we get. Everyone says when you get a lot of snow, that's great. It's not. Right now, it's great for us to get some cold, give me some -10, -15 weather for a week and a half, and then let it snow, and we'll take all the snow we can get.
Thank you. Mayor Kelly.
Thank you. And through you, a couple of quick questions and a comment, I guess, in terms of climate change and the change in conditions. Now we have Bill Nye with us. Maybe we can reverse that.
I did not say that.
I did. A couple of quick questions. You mentioned the land lease with the district. Is it still ongoing? Have you still got access to a property? And is it in its present condition? Is it suitable for your needs?
So yeah, thanks for the question. The land lease is in, I guess, the second year of a 5-year lease. The challenges we have there is that, we're starting to do some fundraising to build a building. We need about $150,000 to build a steel structure, again, with a concrete floor that instead of having our groomer outside all around. We're very hesitant to do that fundraising and put that building when we don't know if that lease is going to be extended. I'll give you a great example. We applied for Trillium grant funding last year. And one of the main reasons we didn't get the funding is you have to demonstrate a lease of at least 5 years. And we were already into year 1. So we went back to the district in advance of our application for the Trillium grant and said, can we please get some sort of letter that guarantees we're, as long as we don't burn the place down or do something bad, we're going to be able to stay on this piece of land. And the district said, no, we don't do anything more than 5-year leases. So there's our shot at 150 grand that other snowmobile clubs have got in the past from the Trillium grant. We can't do it. So, the ask for land is, is there an acre somewhere that is ugly land nobody wants that somebody could lease us for longer than 5 years that we could put a somewhat temporary / permanent structure?
Just to add to that too, the land that we're on right now is the old district landfill site. And the challenge with that is it is a dump site. There are regulations and environmental. So for us to put any sort of structure on there, we don't think we're going to be allowed to do that. Now, part of the land lease is we were given 100 acres. The cap is 4 acres. So there are some, if we even asked for a ½ acre of, clear cutting some forest and put our building there right at the entrance to it, that would suffice. But we don't think today we don't know today if that is even feasible.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. A question to the delegates, and a comment. to start with is that the focus here is a collaboration that you're asking for the township to help with their background and knowledge and experience to help protect this $126 million of economic development annually is what we're trying to do. Get in a room as a team and try to come up with a solution. I have one question now. The question is that you have 10 board members and a bunch of weekend warriors that go out and make sure the trails are maintained. You have the only paid staff you have are for the groomers.
That's correct.
And the type of thing. And you're doing all you can, but given the current environment and stuff like that, you're hitting, let's say, a lot of snow blocks or roadblocks.
Snowbanks, yes.
Yeah, or snowbanks or whatever.
Yeah.
So what my concern is that if as a region of that we can't do more to help out the club, what is the risk of maybe losing major linkages if we can't partnership with if you cannot partner with somebody?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you're looking at the future of snowmobiling in Muskoka right now. I've been volunteering for 18 years as a volunteer snowmobiler. I don't even have a place up here in the winter. I'm a seasonal resident on Lake Muskoka in summertime, so I sleep on his couch in the wintertime. We do it because we love it and we want to support the businesses, but there are many, many days where we just say, why do we do this? But why don't I just go ride somewhere else? Why do I do this? Why do we work so hard to maintain this trail network for all these businesses, for the recreation? Goodness, you've got the new housing development coming in. They're calling it Muskoka Trails, right? They're pitching the recreational benefits of winter activities to the people that are going to come out and buy houses here and support the community. So, you know, if we start losing all this winter recreation, then I'm not convinced this is such a popular destination in the winter anymore. Right? Certainly, yes, there's people that love to skate and cross-country ski, but snowmobiling is a big part of this. So, you know, the risk here is that, you know, when you look at our trail network, we go from Brandy Lake to Georgian Bay to 9 Mile Lake to MacTier down to 6 Mile Lake, right? We are bringing people into Muskoka through this trail network. And if we quit, there's no one to take over. I'm telling you right now, if we quit, it's over. We're done. The OFSC isn't going to come in and say, oh, okay, here's some new people to run the club. This is it. So, you know, we're not saying we're ready to quit, but why we're here is we're trying to get increased partnership. We see other areas, other districts where the township and the municipality actually reach out to the club and say, hey, how can we help? Do you want to meet with our snow plowing people? Can we keep snow on the side of the trail where you have to go along the road? Are there things we can do? And where we've reached out, we're getting some help, certainly, but you know, we're looking for more of a formal statement of collaboration, a recognition from the township and the district that it's important to this community so that we don't feel we're constantly hitting snowbanks, if you will, and having to fight for every little thing that we need. We're just asking to sit down and talk about these challenges a bit more in the hopes of more collaboration.
And just to add, I think as local businesses as well, I'll give you a perfect example. Would be Bass Lake Roadhouse. We had one of our trails was threatened to be closed last year because of off-trail riding, and I had a call from Trish at Bass Lake Roadhouse said if this trail closes this winter, we have no business, and that's a huge impact to, you know, that is one of the busiest restaurants in our area, and if that closes, what does that tell you for, you know, just recreational sports or just tourism in Muskoka during the winter? You know, and that doesn't even count the list that we had there of all the other establishments, you know, that count on winter tourism.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to assure council that the resolution that has been drafted that we will be discussing later creates a path forward for exactly the request, which is to work with staff collaboratively. So just so there's an assurance here, we can debate that later if we want to support that idea or not, but that has been written out. But I do see Mayor Kelly and then Councillor Bosemorth.
Thank you. And through you, this may turn out to not be a question, but it's a comment. But while these two are here, I had the pleasure of meeting them first, I think 2 years ago, or a year ago this month, when I went to, just more out of curiosity than anything else, help them with the bridge over at the island here. I can tell you the crew that turned out that day was huge. I think it was maybe 30 people. And what looked like a mountain of work was done in short order. I dare say that these two in particular, and probably a good number of the rest of the crew, spend more time working the trails than riding them. And I just wanted to mention that while they're here and thank them. I'm a big supporter of their activities for the simple reason I'm not a sledder now, have been for a good chunk of my life. I love it. But we're casting about looking for ways to add an extra season to our economy. And quite frankly, here's the opportunity, or a very good opportunity.
So Mayor Kelly,
That was a question, isn't it?
Well, it wasn't a question. I think that just in the spirit of the process that we have here, we try to keep our focus on questions versus positions or statements at this point in the conversation. So that is why, not because I want to cut you off, but I'm cutting you off. Did you say he relishes doing this? Oh, I relish doing that. Yes. Okay, Councillor Bosenworth.
Thank you. I also am a snowmobiler, and so I get pretty excited hearing your enthusiasm. I know there's a few places I stopped in and I asked, what's your busiest day of the year? These are summer locations. We're talking Memories of Muskoka or some gas station a little farther north of here. Family Day weekend. They have more turnover on Family Day weekend. The question is, do you have any land access issues on anywhere from C Trail to D Trail and the trails you look after?
We don't have time. Yeah. So I can just, I'll point out between the two clubs. So our club, Muskoka Lake Snow Trails Association, operates to McCombs Road, where the railroad tracks are. We do have a situation right now where the railroad has said, we are not going to allow you to cross those tracks anymore to bring you into MacTier. That shuts down a whole artery. So the other option is you come up C Trail from the reserve from Watsaw, and we cross our bridge that we have there at the Moon River. That's a single lane snowmobile bridge. I can't put a groomer over that. We are going to be looking to apply for funding to the OFSC in this coming year, which will probably be about a 3-year project to get a full-size bridge going across here so that we can now link with the other clubs. We can cross groom with the other clubs. We're doing some forward thinking, just what makes sense. Should I just be grooming my 130 kilometers of trail, or should I be able to have my 6 operators go all the way up into Perry Sound? The OFSC doesn't care where we groom as long as that machine is running and it is churning trail. So yes, we have a challenge with that. We have a challenge with landowners in Port Carling, shutting trails down. We've had problems over at Penwood Road here with trails being shut down. So there's no incentive for landowners right now to have trails going across their property. They get a $15 million insurance policy from the OFSC, and that's it. In the past, we could hand them permits and say, thank you very much. We can't do that anymore because it is controlled by the MTO. So really, we just shake their hand, give them a Tim Hortons gift card and say, thank you very much. But it has been a challenge keeping trails open.
Thank you. Okay. I've not seen any other hands. I do want to thank you for coming today. And we will have more of a discussion later, committee. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are now moving from our delegations into our invited presentations. As a reminder to both committee and to those in the audience that an invited presentation does get a further allowance beyond 5 minutes. And the first one is to invite our Chamber of Commerce. I'm not sure who's presenting today. Mr. Hayde. And welcome.
Chair, Mayor Kelly, council, and staff. My name is Randy Hayde, Chair of the Muskoka Lakes Chamber of Commerce, 3181 Muskoka Road 169 in Dala. It is my privilege to represent our Executive Director, 12 very engaged board members, some of which are with us today, represent all corners of Muskoka Lakes and Watauga Mohawk territory and delivering the Chamber's Q4 end of year report. Thank you for inviting us. As you're aware, we currently have a memorandum of understanding with Township to provide services supporting Township priorities, which 4 pillars being visitor information services, business support, event promotion, and marketing. We appreciate township support, which is critical for our continued success in supporting neighborhood prosperity. We acknowledge 2023 brought a new council and transition of economic development officers. And we appreciate the assistance of CAO and Director Pink's office to improve communication. We're very happy to welcome Councillor Moyer Kent to the board. In your package, you received the 23-year in review of metrics. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. I know you've read this thoroughly, but I'd like to just touch on a couple of highlights which we think are important and demonstrate the success in terms of the return on investment. We've had the highest media presence of any Muskoka chamber. It's all relative to comparisons to our neighboring municipalities, with all due respect. We'd like to expand our benchmarking outside the backyard, benchmarking from the success and activities of the chamber specifically, perhaps comparative to Haliburton, Peterborough, Collingwood, Prince Edward County, far north of Timmins, which runs a fantastic chamber. We generated $200,000 plus economic impact through the visitor center, which is no surprise. September this year was extraordinarily busy, caught us off guard. The highest number of US visitors throughout the entire season was in September this year. We provided unparalleled business support through recruitment assistance, workshops, new business openings, and very strong marketing reach. Our visitor guide, this past number of years, we've published 15,000 copies. Going forward, we hope to publish 20,000 copies with bumped up advertising rates. Significant event production and promotion with sellout crowds. Thank you to council and staff. I know you attended many of those. We appreciate the support. We believe we provide memorable, high quality events. We also believe there stands a greater opportunity for the chamber and township to collectively accelerate event promotion. An expanded calendar of events, including the Muskoka Lakes Museum 60th anniversary upcoming, will certainly garner continued top of mind awareness. Membership realized 20% new member growth, and our membership revenue accounts for just under 35% of our total top line. Few members experienced a solid year. Regrettably, some struggled severely, and most reported a so-so-ish year. Some of our younger members have requested more one-on-one business consultation and smaller business gatherings. And although the chamber's resources are finite, we commit to member engagement as a key measure to support the comfort and well-being of our community. We greatly appreciate Township's fee for service of $50,000, representing just about 16% of our total operating budget. We have highlighted the key line items where applicable and hope these work plan expenses provide you greater clarity and transparency. I will not go through those now, but you've seen certainly in the package where those where the funding and assistance from the township goes, and I think we'll agree it's money well spent. We appreciate Township's critical support and look forward to kickstarting 24 with productive and positive conversation pertaining to an MOU renewal. In the interim, we wish Council much deserved holiday season rest. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions or comments? Any Mayor Kelly questions?
You like his. Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you. And I suppose to our CAO. So 2024 is the MOU year. I wonder if we could discuss for a moment, what does that look like for this council? What does that look like for our relationship with the chamber in terms of, I mean, is there a negotiative team? Is this an economic development role within our staff? I'm just wondering, how does that look in terms of the MOU and how the township and the chamber come to that new MOU or get into that discussion of that?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. It would seem to me that staff should be engaging, so I would assume that would be the executive director of the chamber and Mr. Cox, Mr. Pink, revised concepts / drafts for each of the boards. Those boards would have opportunity to discuss it through their committee process and eventually reach council and whatever the final approval step is with the chamber.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'm seeing none. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
For all your hard work, and I hope you have a fantastic holiday season. Thank you. Okay, our next presentation actually is to do with our fire location study. And at this point, I would like to welcome our Chief Morale to introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you through you to committee. Good morning, committee. I'm not quite sure if you want me to deliver my report now or if you just prefer I introduce. You want me to? Okay, I will do my full report then. In front of committee, I believe it's further on in the agenda. There is a report from myself concerning this matter. What we're talking about today, we have a consultant that is visiting us, and this is following up on one of the product recommendations, as committee will recall, from the Fire Master Plan delivered report on May the 10th. Council approved the award of contract for a fire station location study to Emergency Management Group of Barrie, Ontario. This study is composed of two parts. Phase 1, which is what we will have a presentation on today, information gathering and evaluation of the current deployment model. And phase 2, which will be coming forthwith in the new year, development of alternatives and identification of a preferred deployment model. Bringing to the podium today, I will be bringing in the room Larry Broussard. He's the lead consultant. Larry has 45 years of experience in emergency services with both policing and fire. And via Zoom, Lyle Kwan will be joining us. He is the Vice President of Operations for Emergency Management Group. He has over 35 years of experience in both policing and fire. One thing that I will highlight for committee before the consultants begin their presentation is the highlights from their presentation that has been delivered as one of the appendices. In figure 2, it does illustrate significant overlap in the response that we are giving the public today in Muskoka Lakes. I would also highlight for committee, there's a report card of sorts, and I believe that's on page 40 in the package. 7 out of 10 fire stations lack sufficient space to accommodate modern fire apparatus. And as well, equipment storage was highlighted as a need in all of our fire stations. This lack of space, coupled with the health and safety requirements that I'm sure the consultant will expand upon, they relate to ventilation and having areas for decontamination for our fire service members. In addition to the ongoing issues that are pressing within the fire service, how we deliver the service today, I would highlight for committee that there are development projects in marketplace that will highlight growth for the fire service, and most of our facilities appear unable to accommodate that growth. So at this time, I will call to the podium Mr. Larry Broussard to present the phase 1 presentation.
Morning, Madam Chair.
Morning.
Member of council, staff. I think Mr. Kwan is going to join us by Zoom first, and I'll defer to Mr. Kwan to give some opening remarks and some comments, and then I'll take over. Mr. Kwan's at the airport, apparently.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Kwan. Are you there? Oh, we can't hear you very well.
How is that? Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes, thank you and welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about that picture. I was showing a friend of mine a chance that I had to fly in the summertime. Anyway, again, thank you very much for this opportunity. I will start off with just a general overview of the project and how we got to this point. And then I will pass this presentation over to Mr. Broussard. So next slide, please. So in 2022, I had the pleasure of leading the team in the Fire Master Plan project. And within that project, there was a couple of recommendations made. in relation to some station optimization. And generally, there was three key points that were made. The first was the consideration of closing of 2 fire stations to reduce the overall numbers. There was also the creation of a new 5-station model, and that was presented in the master plan. And then third, the creation of 3 key stations that would be sort of like super stations, we'll call them, with 4 substations to support them. Now, with the amount of recommendations that were made and the impact that these recommendations could have on the community and the fire safety and response ability, we also made a recommendation that a full feasibility study needed to be conducted through utilizing the Director of Works and a third party. At the time that the recommendations were made, we'll call it a snapshot in time. And now that we've come to this point a year later, this gave us the opportunity to do a more complete review. Now, having said that, I'll turn the floor back over to Mr. Broussard to follow through on where we are with the phase 1 of the study. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lyle. And we're very much at the midpoint of this project. So I was fortunate to be brought on board. I wasn't involved in the master fire planning process, though I am familiar with the Township of Muskoka Lakes. I live next door in Gravenhurst and was the fire chief there for a number of years. And so I have worked with Chief Morrell and his predecessor for almost a decade. And so I responded to incidents in Muskoka Lakes and have had the benefit of Muskoka Lakes responding to Gravenhurst on a number of occasions to assist. So I understand the interplay between the departments and the dynamics involved and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Kwan said, 2 phases to this project. We're at midpoint. Phase 1, which I'm going to talk about today, is really the information gathering stage, gathering data points to either support one of the previous recommendations or potentially come up with a totally different scenario for you to consider at some point. I was unencumbered by the notion of you must find support for this recommendation or that recommendation. In fact, I was told not even to consider them, to do the data research, synthesize the data, and then come up with the best solution for Muskoka Lakes. So I'm not encumbered by what's been already done. I'll share that with you. And so phase 2 will follow in the next couple of months, and you'll get another report back in a few months that brings back what we feel is the best solution for Muskoka Lakes going forward. Next slide, please. So the image on the right shows a bunch of puzzle pictures, and this is really puzzle pieces rather. This is what we're doing at this point. We're gathering those pieces of the puzzle to try and get a clearer picture. And one of the things I found is that the pieces of the puzzle don't necessarily individually give you tremendous insight. They are little chunks of the puzzle, but none of them individually tell the whole story. And it's not till you lay them all together and you start to lay them out on the table, as the picture on the left sort of indicates, that you start to get an understanding of the interplay between the various data points that we've collected. Next slide, please. The picture, the image on the left of that slide shows you your current 10 station locations, 10 fire stations in the Township of Muskoka Lakes. Tremendous coverage. And the image on the right shows an overlay of those stations and their response times in terms of a metric that's espoused by one of the professional organizations. That's a 14-minute response time. Now that map is very busy and it's hard to look at. It's hard for me to look at. And that's why in the appendix of the report, you'll see individualized maps for each station, which shows you clearly what their response times are. And I'll refer back to that appendix in just a minute. We did look at the response model that Muskoka Lakes currently uses, and I will say it's very contemporary in every sense. Muskoka Lakes Fire does use a variable response model, I call it, that matches the response to an emergency with the risk that the firefighters are attending. A very intelligent way of selecting response. In days gone by, typically you would send the local fire station, the one station to an incident and hope for the best and then call for more help. Muskoka Lakes doesn't do that. They use a very proactive model that sees a minimum of 3 stations, for example, responding to a structure fire based on the risk, so that there's more people and more resources coming right from the get-go. And that's a very intelligent way to do things, in my opinion. One of the things that we looked at during this information gathering phase was standards and best practices in the province of Ontario. So could I have the next slide, please? And so we looked at the Ontario Building Code, the Ontario Fire Code, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which is critical for you as an employer to understand the implications thereof, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the Community Risk Assessment that was done for this community last year, and lastly, the National Fire Protection Association standards. Now, what is, we hear a lot about the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. But what is this place? It's important for you to understand that this is a US-based organization that has literally hundreds and hundreds of standards or guidelines that they apply for the fire service. None of them mean anything in Canada unless they're endorsed by some law. And the building code references some NFPA standards, so they become law in Ontario. But generally speaking, the people who make the laws about the fire service are you. You set the level of service in your community that you want to see delivered based on your own unique needs and circumstances. There are no laws that says you need this many fire stations, you have to respond in this amount of time, you need these many firefighters, you need these kind of trucks. Those do not exist here. This is policy that's established by council based on advice from staff and your uniqueness here. The data gathering that we've done so far, next slide please, has looked at the facilities themselves here in Muskoka Lakes. We've looked at the structural elements of the buildings, and generally they're not falling down. That's the good news story. There are 10 of them, and some of them have been around for quite some time. One is approaching 80 years of age, and that sort of exceeds the normal life cycle that we're seeing in public service type buildings, which is about 50 years. You can expect to get out of a new fire station. So some of your facilities are a little bit long in the tooth, shall we say. You've got some that are fantastic on the other end of the spectrum. So you have a very wide range of buildings here. We looked at operational assessments of the facilities, and we did this with fire department staff to understand how well they are functioning as a fire station. And some are performing well, and some are performing less well. We also looked at the financial situation in terms of performance of the buildings, in terms of what they're costing you today. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. For the structural assessments, we did bring in another person who specialized in that, and you can see his comments detailed in pages 32 to 38 of the report. Our operational assessments are summarized on 39 and 40, and the financial assessments on 40 to 43 of that report. I trust you've all had a look at those. Next slide, please. There was some question about the current annual operating costs, and you can see there that we've factored those in based on the last 5 years. The figure that's shown there for the annual operating cost is $86,000 and change. Now, we're not entirely confident in that data set, I'll share with you. We've looked at the financial records that the town has, and I'll share with you that township staff is getting more robust about their record keeping and getting better at it every year. And certainly in the last 2 years, especially, we saw things included that hadn't been included in the previous 3 years. So I'm not entirely sure that that is an accurate number. So I just wanted to share that out in front with you. But it is an indication of what you're spending on your stations currently. Chief Muro, next slide, please, sorry. Chief Muro alluded to the growth that we can see looking forward into the community. Some upwards of more than 2,000 units are anticipated in the short-term horizon from what we can see. But we know development in the community is very much dependent on the developers and what they bring forth with you. And we can see a certain distance into the future, but perhaps not as far as we'd like to see. I'll give you the example. One of the communities I worked in was invaded by Mattamy. And that was an experience to go through. And things change in that community in a very short period of time. So things can happen very quickly, and I'm sure you're aware of that. Next slide, please. We've talked about the current deployment model, but one of the nice things that I want to share with this image is that as we start to gather the data points that we've collected, and they're laid out in the report, but we start to gather this three-dimensional picture that the data points start to show us. And then we start to see how one data point is linked to another, but may necessarily not be linked to a third. But when you look at the data points in a 3D kind of vision, you start to understand how they interplay and connect. Again, the current deployment model that is used here is very appropriate for the community, and I won't say any more about that at this point. Next slide, please. Stakeholder input, an important part of any project, and we've done that portion with the firefighters. We had 3 town hall meetings with the firefighters this summer, invited them all out, and got some good input from them. But we're not done with that. In fact, one of the reasons that we're here today is hoping to get your input, your ideas on what we should be looking at in terms of the fire station location piece. And as the next couple of months wear on, we hope to be doing more and more of that. We certainly hope to reach out to the community as well with the help of your corporate communications people. And the next slide, please. And then the job will get down to brass tacks. And that is, again, bringing all the data points together, analyzing them, and bringing back a recommendation for you that we think makes the most sense for you going forward. And so that's what you'll see the next time that I'm standing in front of you, hopefully in the next couple of months or so. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll stop. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'll open any questions or input that committee has this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And committee, just a reminder that today's presentation is for information only. The consultant and staff are not looking for any specific direction from us at this particular time. So this is an opportunity for us to ask questions, seek clarity. And at this point, I will open up the floor. Are there any questions? Mayor Kelly, you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I have 3.
Okay,
thank you. Since I'm not allowed to compliment you on the report, I won't. But I did have 3 questions. Number one, when you measure response time, does that include gathering the volunteers at the station and deployment to the scene?
It's a great question, because there are elements to the response time data. If you look to just one of the examples in the appendices, and we can pick any one of the stations. I'm at page 59 now, looking at Walker's Point, for example. On the right-hand side, you'll see a column, 3 columns at the bottom that list turnout times. And so turnout time is the time from the phone call that's made to 911 until the first truck from that station starts to go down the road. So that's the turnout time of your staff, your paid on call firefighters. The total response time includes that plus the length of time it takes them to get to the location. So on the right-hand side, the 3rd column there for Walker's Point, we're looking at the cumulative total response time on average for that station in that particular year. And we've given you 5 years of data there. So it gives a good indication. And one of the things that I noted going through those response times was that the turnout times for most of the stations and the response times were pretty consistent from year to year. So things are fairly consistent. They vary by seconds for the most part, but very consistent.
Okay, thank you. I think you had a couple more.
I do have at least one more. Next question is, there's the contemplation that perhaps 1 or 2 or maybe more stations might be repurposed or closed. And I'm curious to know, in your experience, when you close a fire station, do you run into environmental hazards? Is there naturally going to be oil tanks or fuel tanks or fire suppressant or something that's going to make repurposing or reusing the building a real challenge?
Thank you.
Again, great question. And the answer is it depends, which is, we're laughing because I know I've heard it from lawyers all the time. It depends. So it depends on the function of that station, where they've whether they've had in-ground fuel tanks and so on and so forth. In my experience, it's not as common as you would think. There are not a lot of environmental impacts from a fire station typically.
Thank you. Did you have another question? No? Okay, Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you, and I will frame this as a question, I guess, to our chief. And again, just for a moment, over the years, and I've watched this council for many years, this has been, the fire piece has always been sort of a community, there's been a lot of rooted community involvement in whether it's fundraising, et cetera. And, I think I think we're turning a corner here. I'm hoping we as a township are turning a corner here and treating this more like a business. And what I mean by that respectfully is to you, sir, I'm wondering how comfortable you are with this process. Personally, I think that it's fairly important to pick this thing up, look at it on all sides, understand it. And I do think it's really important for us to support staff. So to give you the tools, because I'm not an expert in fire, and you clearly are, and we have those folks here. I'm going to be really paying close attention to this because I am really, I think, in support of where we're going. I'm just wondering how you feel about it in terms of how it's going. And I'm just
So
water
a
cooler talk. Thank you.
Question for Chief Morrell. Okay.
Through you, yeah, I'm exceptionally comfortable with it. The CIO was very supportive of me early on. I asked for this. I actually asked for this very, very early on to ensure that we were looking at we call it all 6 sides of the fire. Let's take a look at all 6 sides of the service and ensure that we're presenting the most efficient and effective operation. And the reason for that is there are investments that are coming down the pipe or pike. I don't know. I've heard this said 2 different ways lately. So there are investments coming down in other regulatory formats and in health and safety worlds that we need to be considerate of how we fund the service from within. So for instance, when I first got here, we took a look at all of our vehicles. We were able to come down to a model that presented a 10-year plan, brought that back to council. We actually saw savings in that model. We've had tremendous success with that model. We were able to show savings of over $1 million. Half of that money was reinvested in the service and the other half was returned to council. So I see this project as being a very similar project, and it allows for us to bring in outside contractors or consultants to look at things that maybe I am not looking at from a blind spot check. Where it lies is it's really a council level decision, as the consultant had noted. It's based on your unique needs, and I am very sensitive to the community involvement piece and how our fire service members are treated in market so we can continue the great service that we have. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I think my question is through you to Director Morrell, Fire Chief Morrell. And there'll be a couple of questions, I think, but the first one, do firefighters have to follow speed limits? We sort of had this conversation before, but I just want to confirm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, through you, yes, they actually have to follow all the rules of the road, despite having red lights on their vehicle. They are to come to a full stop when they meet a stop sign, and they're only allowed to proceed when safe to do so.
So I have 2 concerns. And first of all, I'm a believer that buildings don't put out fires. That's just very, very separate to me. But I am concerned of sort of a statement that, parts of our area will be covered by BALA, for instance. Like if we're going to close Torrance down, we're going to have it covered by BALA. A number of times, and it's actually on a regular basis, but I would say in the last 2 weeks, I've sat for one timing was specifically 12 minutes, another was 13, and then 14 minutes at the train tracks. And now we've reduced the speed limit considerably from BALA to Torrance. that has been a huge impact, and especially during contractor time. I'll just say that, whether it's late in the day or so there is that concern that, what is like, how do you equate for that time? Because that's not a 12-minute recovery or a 14-minute response. I don't know how you get down to 9 Mile. That's my concern. And then one other is, in doing this, so for instance, would we be then relocating the fireboat in Torrance? Because I will say that those islanders that fundraise for that fireboat to protect them will have a lot to say. So I'm just trying to understand that.
So Chief Morrell, did you want to comment? I think these must be all things that are being considered by the group. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, through you. That's exactly what I was going to suggest. That is, if we wait for the next iteration of the phase, this may be an option that is presented, as was suggested by the consultant. Everything's on the table. One of the options that was presented in the previous report was to close 2 stations, and one of those stations was Torrance. But obviously, this is stuff that we would have to contemplate. I will add, just for the councillors' input, in the 5 years I've been here, we have not discounted or reduced our recruitment levels in all areas. We are constantly recruiting. We're recruiting right now. Everybody at home, please put your applications in right now. You can go to www.muskokalakes.ca. So we are needing people in all of our areas, and we want to make sure those fire stations are full. The reason that you do see Bala come for cover off is, from a health and safety perspective, we recognize now from best practices, we need to have a certain number of firefighters for certain applications. And the councillor is correct. There are certain things that become problematic for our response. So even from a litigation point of view, our members, when encountering a train, if you're listening to our radio transmissions, you'll hear them say delayed by train. That's for legal reasons that we indicate why we're delayed. So the councillor is correct. We will be contemplating those things if a station closure is envisioned. However, the change to where the boat is located, I don't see that in the future. I think we can still have vessels in places where we can easily get to them, and Queen's Walk is a very easy area to access for us.
Thank you. CAO Hammond.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just further to Chief Morrell's comments, I think it's important for committee to understand that this study is going to look at options. There's going to be recommendations with respect to options. There's going to be community consultation with respect to the second phase of the study. And then I think you need to think about the service level study that we're going to do next year. That's a conversation where you will consider the recommendations. So when these recommendations come forward, they're recommendations. So your service level study next year will be an opportunity to discuss those recommendations. And that's another opportunity for community involvement. So I think that's been the journey so far. And I hear what you're saying, Councillor Zavitz, with respect to community involvement historically, and there should be community involvement when we discuss service levels next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bosemore.
I wonder if our delegate could comment on the scores on page 40, which is the fire station operational performance assessment scores. Just curious, even our newest station ranks 25 out of 50. Can you give us some sense of what's considered a good score, and maybe how do we compare in some of the other areas you've done work?
Yeah, it's a great question. The operational performance assessment was done collaboratively with fire department staff. Well, we ranked 50 elements of the station that were either yes or no. Either they were there or they weren't. And I think perhaps the most obvious example of things that were missing and are missing from even newly built stations are provisions for electric vehicles. There are no charging stations outside your stations. There are no charging stations inside your stations. We are starting to see electric fire trucks being delivered in Canada. Vancouver put the first one in Canada in service just this past week. Toronto has electric vehicle on order, fire truck, as does Mississauga and Brampton. Are they coming to to Muskoka Lakes? We don't know that, but one of the future looking provisions for fire stations is to have provisions for both small and large vehicle charging. And so the absence of those ranked as I know. Your question about the Port Carling Station meeting the halfway mark, it's perhaps not a good way to look at it as seeing the raw score and saying, oh, only got 25 out of 50. So the Port Carling Station is the flagship of the fleet. It is very well situated. One of the examples on the negative side there is that it doesn't have a lot of storage space. I'm working at a brand new building now that doesn't have enough storage space. We never seem to plan for storage space. And so storage space for fire stations figures prominently in the assessment. We look for essential basic storage space and enhanced storage space because you always need more. I'll tell you as a fun exercise, I took the same score sheet and went into Bracebridge, Muskoka's newest fire station. They didn't score near 50 either, with the most contemporary fire station built in Muskoka. And so I wouldn't be concerned about scores, and that we're close to the halfway mark or even down into the 15 area. I am concerned about the stations that scored 2. Those stations are obviously lacking in many amenities that they should have. And the fire service has changed in the last 10 years. Firefighter cancers, as you know, are a driving issue for the fire service. We know that the province, through WSIB, has created legislation that says if a firefighter gets one of these, I'm not sure the number, 19 might be the number today, 22 cancers. If a firefighter gets one of these 22 cancers, it's presumed that they got it while they were working. And so fire station design has to take these issues into consideration as well, because the diesel exhaust from our trucks is a carcinogen. When we come back from a fire, our gear is laden with carcinogens that we've absorbed on the fire scene. So we have to be able to clean and isolate those pieces of equipment, that personal protective gear, and clean it. These things weren't on the design sheet 10 years ago. And so if a fire station here is 60, 70, 80 years old, it's no wonder that it doesn't have these things. The world is a changing place, and we become smarter and smarter as a global community every day. And that's just one small element, but there are others, but I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. One last question, and I think I'm not going to put Ryan on the spot. Our past chief, many don't know that we had him for some time. So some of the things that I read through the report, the bunker gear, for instance, and on all of that, I've read that for years, and I have never seen anything come forward to say this is how we should fix it. So when should this is how we should fix it without having to do, like, I'd like to see that fix it this year, like this coming year, as opposed to waiting until a new building gets built. Because honestly, when you put it in the report, for some of us who have been around probably too long, it's been a long time with these same conversations, right? Yeah.
Thank you. It's a great. Thank you for being so in tune with the issue, because it's important to every one of your firefighters. Every single one of them has this in the back of their mind. Wasn't that long ago that you buried a firefighter? Unfortunately, he passed away from cancer, right? So it's in the back of everyone's mind. And so I would say Muskoka Lakes is being very proactive. It has introduced proper cleaning equipment to some of the stations. And so you're building capacity as you go along. We can't do it all at once. It's cost prohibitive, but we are making incremental steps. When I say we, I respectfully included me in that with Chief Merrill, because he's doing all the right things in incremental steps. And I think that's important to understand. But we learn more and more every single day. This last year, we learned, this will astonish you, I think. The gear that firefighters wear, every single firefighter in North America is wearing gear that has a chemical in its waterproofing element that is one of these forever chemicals. And there is no replacement. So we learned this about a year ago and shared it across international borders. And the manufacturers are working very hard to find a solution, but today there is no solution. And so firefighters are continually going into fires wearing gear that can actually harm them, but there is no other solution. We'll find a solution tomorrow. I'm very confident of that. And then we'll all move to move to that solution. But it's a changing world that we're in. It's evolving. And I give credit to the chief because he has been very proactive about addressing these issues as he's able. And you support that through the budget process, of course. So.
Okay, thank you. CAO Hammond.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add, and Chief Morrell may want to put a bit more detail around this, but he and I have had discussions, like he has talked to me about this. And he has introduced operational guidelines for cleaning so that when folks come back from a scene, you know, they do their decontamination. Have we got further work to do? Yes. And Chief Morrell has discussed with me bringing a report back to you on the cancer prevention awareness in the new year. Fits into that framework report that he brought back in November. And so you'll be able to sort of understand the relevance back to the recommendations of the risk assessment, the master plan recommendations, et cetera, because it does sort of fit into this facility product piece. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. I just have a few questions. First of all, you said it was $86,000 basically for the upkeep. That's the maintenance, the heat, the hydro. How does that compare with other areas? Because I looked at this, we have 35,119 square feet. Divided that into that, that's $2.49 per square foot. That seems very, very reasonable from what I'm used to. What are other areas spending per square foot on their stations? That's one thing.
Okay, thank you.
Second, response time. If we start moving stations, we go down to 3 or 5, whatever it is. I think somewhere, one of the reports I read, they would prefer the firemen not to go directly to the fire, but to the station and then back and forth. So that's going to really hurt our response time, is it not, if they're not going that way?
Okay, thank you. There's Chief Morrell.
Yeah, I prefer to answer the second question first. So the private owned vehicles going to calls is really what you're asking about. Yeah. Going direct. So this is a concern. It's a safety concern, a major safety concern, actually, in light of the fact that, you know, contaminants exist in our gear that would then preclude that we would then allow people to have their gear with them. So they would be possibly exposing their family members to that, those contaminants. We have initiated policies that allow our members to use their best judgment. So where this occurs is you have a fire at your house, house A. So Mr. Edwards calls 911. What should occur is our members attend the hall to take the vehicles to the call. When all the vehicles have left the hall, then members can decide based on what they're hearing for size up at that call that they then would attend the scene. This is the preferred way to do it. If you go the other way, you could have 20 people on your front lawn and no fire truck. Mm-hmm. So there's method to the madness. So private owned vehicles going to calls is a bad idea in Muskoka, especially with skinny laneways and access. We don't need people doing that. And plus, for insurance purposes, it's not a good idea to encourage your people to do that. On the issue of response time in general, you do want people going to a fire hall and then responding to a call. Your assembly time, or the turnout time, as the consultant calls it, is something that will be factored into the second phase. You'll hear more about that turnout time, putting a fire station closer to where your people assemble to it. That I hope answers your question on that second piece about the private owned vehicles. The first question you asked about the operating expenses. So yes, we're super efficient with the square footage that we have today. And as the consultant commented, we may not have captured all the costs. Some of the capital investments, like painting the building or doing the roof, that is not in that investment number that you see there. I don't know. I'll let him comment about how efficient we are versus other areas, but those operating expenses, they do not counteract the other
issues that are mentioned in the report. Because I would highlight to you that we have a fiduciary responsibility and a due diligence responsibility to make sure that we're setting up our service so that it can continue and do the safe thing for our members. So as was highlighted in the report, a lot of our stations, although the square footage and the price tag is in a good place, they're not adequately sized for the storage that we need today. So for example, we have buildings where we are actually having to buy a fire truck customized to fit the building. That adds cost. So that's not a good thing, right? That's 6 out of our 10 stations are over the 40-year mark, which I used to understand was an accountant thing. 4 of them are over the 50-year mark and a couple of them are approaching 80 years. So, you know, in 80 years, a lot of things have changed and we need to keep up with those times and make sure our buildings aren't just barns for horses anymore. They're designed for fire trucks, for today's modern fire service.
Thank you.
Supplemental.
Okay.
I also, I believe I read in the actual report about, and that training rooms and that for some of them. Why do all of them have to have a training session? Could they not go to training to 1 or 2 stations, which make more sense? And that just looking at things like that. I'm interested to see what it is. I had asked the consultant what the average of the square foot now was, because he does other studies in other areas. I think we're very actually very efficient in this. Thank you.
Okay, so I am going to ask our consultant, if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, I think you are very efficient with your maintenance costs on your buildings, although again, not to overemphasize it, but we're not capturing all of the information. As Chief Muriel has mentioned, we're not capturing any of the capital costs. We were just looking at operational budgets and the costs there. So you are, I think, on average, I think you're in great shape there in terms of what you're currently spending. But you're maintaining. You're for the most part, you're maintaining older infrastructure, older doors, older plumbing, those kinds of things. So I think you are on par with certainly the area fire departments here. To my knowledge, they're all about the same. There's no anomalies that are showing up in your annual maintenance costs for my eye. So things are well run in that sense.
Okay. CAO. No. Okay. Was there another question? I don't think so. Okay. All right, committee, are there any other questions? I'm seeing none. I do want to thank both of you for a great report, a good update on phase 1. We look forward to hearing about phase 2 and how you pull all these different puzzle pieces together for us.
Thank you.
So thank you. Committee, I am going to suggest that we take a 15-minute break. That brings us back here, I will say at 20 to 11. Okay, thank you.
All you have to see is Celia. Don't worry about it.
Okay, committee, everybody is back sitting around the table. Welcome back, Councillor Kent. Thank you. Good to see you. Committee, I am now going to turn the day over, or the floor over, to our Director of Public Works, Director Becking, to take us through item 8A.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of committee. If I can get my presentation, please. Worship, if I could ask you to just slide and get a little cozy with Councillor Zavitz. I have a pointer. Doesn't seem to want to work on that screen for some reason. Okay. Well, I think it's doing it on the wall, but it won't do anything on the screen.
I saw it on the screen.
Can you see it on the screen? I can't.
Well, that's good. Wait, there you go.
Well, it's intermittent. Keep moving it. Continue.
I can't see it though.
You can see you.
So I believe we're just waiting for your presentation.
We're waiting for the presentation,
okay.
Madam Chair. There we go. Okay. I'm pleased to present the next version of the Township Asset Management Plan for your consideration. If we can go to the next slide, Elizabeth, please. So by way of background, this asset management plan stuff is actually a mandatory requirement of the province of Ontario. It's mandated under Ontario Regulation 588-17. It consists of 4 components: having a strategic asset management planning policy, having a asset management version that addresses core infrastructure, and the definition of core infrastructure as it relates to the township relates to roads, bridges, and stormwater management. You will recall that Council adopted the core asset management plan version in July of last year. The third component is a asset management plan that addresses all of the assets that are currently under the jurisdiction and control of the township, and that is in fact what is before you today. It covers all of our assets. It's based on our current levels of service, and it was required to be completed by July 1st of 2024. So we're 6 months ahead of the game. The final version or the final component is the adoption of a corporate asset management plan that is based on desired level of services and includes a financial plan to support that level of service in perpetuity. That is the next 9 yards, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Can I have the next slide, please, Elizabeth? This rather busy slide, frankly, tells you everything that you need to know. I'm not seeing the dot. Okay. So starting at the top of the slide, the township currently has something in the order of $620 million worth of assets under its jurisdiction and control. Overall, the assets are in fair condition. Now that's based on a weighted average, so it's statistics. But generally speaking, it's in fair condition. There as you can see by the various bars, orange is assets or our assets in very good condition. Good is the yellow, green is fair. The sort of reddy brown is poor, and the final, the brown bar is very poor. The good news is that there's a reasonable distribution. Obviously, we want as much or as many of our assets in the fair and better condition. We have about 11% or $70.1 million worth of assets that are considered to be in poor or very poor physical condition. The news doesn't get better, however. If you look at the blue line, what that's telling you is that there's $149 million worth of assets that are beyond the end of their useful lives. Now that is more qualitative than quantitative insofar as it's based on assumptions about useful life. But that having been said, those useful lives have been drawn from industry standards and best practices. So it's a fairly accurate number. The part that should be concerning of you or to you is the fact that of that $197.4 million worth of assets that's currently in fair condition, 79.1% or 2%, 79 million of it is going to very quickly slide over into poor or worse condition. Right now, you're living on borrowed time. And it's just a matter of time when it moves to the right. The current level of expenditures based on our 2022 actuals amounted to 6.9 million. So let's call that $7 million for round numbers. That's the amount of money that we're spending on our infrastructure annually. So if you look at 70.1 million and 7 million, basically what that says is that you're only funding enough to address the 10 years that currently is sitting on the books. So in other words, I'll refer to my little trick. The point is that you're working down at the bottom of that curve. So you're allowing the condition of the asset to go to the point where it's no longer tolerable. And then you're spending the equivalent of the $60 million to bring it back up into a fit state and allow it to then deteriorate again. In other words, worst first. That is by far the most expensive way to run this operation that you can do. What you want to be doing is operating along the purple line, the sawtooth, in other words, which equates to my circles, my circular arrows, the optimum. You don't want the assets to get to the point where your only choice is to totally reconstruct them. And that is a far more efficient and effective way. It costs less money, and it results in a better level of service to our customers. But the problem is that we can't get there because we're constantly mired and putting Band-Aids on the 70 million. And we've got to break that cycle. The final piece of information on this slide is, frankly, in my mind, the truly scary part of it all. When you consider where we are today, based on the estimates that we've put together between the value of the backlog that exists today plus all of the needs that will get created over the next 25 years, you need to be spending $18.5 million a year to keep pace. That is truly scary. Because it's a lot of money that frankly we don't have. Now, I probably have beaten up on us a little bit. I would point out, however, that despite all the challenges that we've faced, we're managing to keep our head above water, albeit barely, but we're keeping our head above water. If you crunch the numbers, we get a D plus rating. When I went to school, that wasn't considered great, but it was better than an F. And so I think we're at a point where we have some pretty fundamental decisions that we need to make. Can I get the next slide, please? So the path forward. We need to continue our efforts in terms of being a knowledgeable owner. We need to know the good, the bad, and frankly, the ugly, because it's only when you've got good, accurate information that you can make good, sound decisions. And I would strongly encourage you, because I'm not going to be here, that you need to devote your energies to making sure that you keep this up to date. You don't want this to turn into some kind of vinyl trophy that sits on a shelf and gets pulled down once every 5 years because you're statutorily mandated to update it. The current asset management policy that is in place needs to be updated every 5 years. Its validity only lasts 5 years. And that should be done in the second quarter of this year. The big to-do for the coming year, and we've spoken about this several occasions through the budgetary process, is the setting of levels of service. Right now, the only measure that we have in terms of level of service provided by the township is how much money you're spending on an annual basis. That's the only metric we have. I am encouraging you and strongly encourage you to undertake the level of service study that's being proposed in the forthcoming budget. They're going to walk you through, frankly, some pretty tough decisions about what we provide to the public. We as an organization provide to the public. I will be the first one to tell you it's not going to be an easy discussion. And there will be some tough decisions that will have to be made. You know, we heard from Chief Morrell as an example about the state of our fire stations. Those fire stations are going to need some fairly significant investments in the grand scheme of things in order to continue to function in a safe and effective way. And the status quo, quite frankly, is not an acceptable solution. Once you've done the heavy lifting, then it becomes an exercise for Mr. Donaldson and his folks to put some numbers to that and develop a financial plan that you find acceptable. And frankly, it's going to be an iterative process. You're going to set a level of standard or a level of service. He's going to tell you how much it's going to cost. You're going to either say, yeah, that's fine, or no, that's not fine, and my money's on the ladder. They'll go back and revise the level of service. Once you think you've got that right, then again, they'll come back with the numbers until you arrive at something that you feel is supportable into the future. All of that has to be done by the end of the first quarter of 2025. So that we are then in a position to prepare the final version of the corporate asset management plan, which has to be adopted by council by July 1, 2025. So there's next year's work plan, essentially, for you. Madam Chair, I was sensitive to comments that we received from from committee members with respect to the transportation master plan. You felt that having 150 or 200 pages dropped in your laps at a meeting and being asked to endorse something was unfair and unreasonable. So my suggestion and the recommendation before you is to simply accept at this point the document, or receive the document. You can use some small portion of your intervening Christmas holidays to read some rather boring words that I've penned over the last little while. If you have any questions or concerns, by all means, get them to me and I will attempt to answer them. I will come back with a consolidated or updated version for your consideration and adoption in January. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, just before I open it up for questions and discussion, I would like to read the resolution and then just open it up for conversation, if that's okay. So moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Be it resolved that committee received the corporate asset management plan dated December 2023 and attached to report GF-2023-081 as Appendix 1. That committee members forward any questions or comments to the Director of Operational Services in order to draft a final version to be recommended to Council for adoption in January 2024. So that's a resolution in front of us today, as noted in the agenda package. And at this point, I will open up the floor. I did see your hand up, Mayor Kelly. I think there's, Councillor Zavitz, Councillor Kent. Mayor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you. A couple of, well, first of all, I think this is really a breath of fresh air approach and a report. So I thank you for that. The timing of the heavy lift and the public engagement and the tough questions sort of coincides with your retirement. I note that as well.
Was not intentional, Madam Chair.
But
I'm always up for a good debate and discussion.
This makes almost a clinical decision out of what has historically been more legacy driven and relationship driven, and I think that's absolutely the right way to manage assets of this organization. I had a quick question about the chart that fades to brown on the right hand side.
Elizabeth, can you bring up the chart again, please?
And the question is really quite simple. In that brown patch, and I can't remember the total amount, do you suspect that there's some asset that has decayed to the brown because there's a sense that it's of limited ongoing use? We might as well not put a lot in that, let her go because it's not going to survive, or are we actually investing as we think appropriate in each piece, regardless of what we think the ultimate outcome of this exercise will be?
I would suggest to you that those assets are there because they are truly in bad condition and because they're not being adequately funded. Let's look at some pretty simple numbers. Of the $70 million that we're talking about, 2/3 of it, actually more than 2/3 of it, is roads and bridges. It's your core assets. And the bad news is you can't get rid of them. You've got to address them. The brown is there because of a lack of funding. If you look at the report card that I crafted for you, your needs are, I forget what the actual numbers are, but suffice it to say, our needs are like less than 30% being funded. So the bottom line is you're simply not putting enough money in there. So then it becomes a question of triage, or in the alternative, who screams the loudest. And frankly, that's no way to run a railroad. I hope that answers your question.
Just before I come to you, Councillor Zavitz, I just want to build on the 2/3 that you said is our core infrastructure, and we can't get rid of it. But this is an area that when we get to our capital service review, is there decision-making that we can go through that helps mitigate that?
There is. Within the bounds of the law, you have the ability to establish standards. As it relates to roads and bridges, there is a thing called the minimum maintenance standard, which is Ontario Regulation 23902. It sets out the barest of minimums. Frankly, the public would not tolerate the barest of minimums, but you collectively have the ability to establish standards. And having established what those standards, and having established what constitutes a level of acceptability, you can fund that. You may decide, as an example, that you're not going to reconstruct any road for 60 years. I wouldn't advise it, but you could make that decision. And it's provided that the maintenance meets the minimum tolerable standard under 23902. That's acceptable. So you can make those kinds of choices, but they are not simple choices. And as I say, that's what the heavy lifting is going to be about in 2024.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you. And to you, Director. I suppose, you've been here as long as I have. And, we've worked together as a group for 5 years. So I guess to where the mayor was going, it's surprisingly easy, as we've entertained some 5 budgets, perhaps 6, that it's easy to get caught up. And this is for the public who's watching today, because I get a lot of questions about it. How did we get to this? How did the township get to this place in terms of, so at the end of the day, I guess I would ask you, is there will you, within the body of your report, as you work with us, have some sort of a hyperlink to the, absolutely critical? Like right now, you're actually being gentle, you're being kind, you just bring in a fulsome report to us. Are there some absolutely A+++ critical right now? Because I'm not hearing that, but it must be, right? So I'm just asking that question. Thank you.
There are some critical things that are before you, and frankly, you already know about them. We've got a wall just down the road here. We've got a dam down in Bala that needs to be addressed. I've pushed them to the front of the line because I truly believe that in the absence of some attention, they pose a significant risk. I think it's time, and this is where my retirement comes in, I think it's time for you to get a fresh set of eyes. I've been looking at this for 5 years now. In that 5 years, I've assembled the information that documents and demonstrates, frankly, what I knew 2 weeks after showing up here. But now I can prove it. The proof is in front of you. I think it's at this point, it's important that you get a fresh set of eyes to help you guide you through the next step. I can do it. To be quite honest with you, I could go through the list and I could come up with some recommendations that I know would not be popular, but I know would be the right thing to do. But I'm not sure that that's the way you want to go about doing it. or should go about doing it, quite frankly. And I think it would be fundamentally healthy for you to get a separate set of eyes on this. Somebody from outside the organization who isn't living, eating, breathing this stuff day in, day out, 24 hours a day. And so to the mayor's earlier comment, that is part of the reason why I decided to retire when I did.
I don't even know how to comment right now. I will comment, but I'm focused on what we have in front of us.
That's not the reason why I'm doing
I know.
it. But I think it truly is important that you get some outside help to walk you through this, because I've seen this in another life, and I can tell you, you're not heading for a pleasant experience. Been there, done that, and bought the t-shirts.
Thank you. CAO Hammond, help.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I want to focus committee's attention on the concept that Mr. Becking raised with his analysis. Like, we have conversations about different projects in the moment, but I think he's raised a really important point. His focus and the projects that he's bringing forward to you are based on risk to this municipality and the potential outcomes, which the costs of which would far outweigh the investments that we're going to make initially to fix that problem. And I think that's important for us to be thinking about constantly. I also want to just bring to your attention one other point. He mentioned the date of 2025, and perhaps he or Mr. Donaldson can confirm my understanding here, but in this instance, this is the 2025 deadline is real. And there are implications from the perspective of potential future funding from the province for infrastructure projects, et cetera. So we need to have this kind of analysis done, which is what we've been working to over the past 4 years. And you know, Councillor Zavitz has asked questions about which it revolve around when's the rubber going to hit the road. Well, I think it is in 24, right? It's, you know, we're going to start looking and seeing looking at and seeing the results of the fruits of our labor so far. So, but I did want to point out to you that I think that 2025 is a real date insofar as the province is concerned about future funding. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I could just follow up with the,
yes.
We get between OMPF and gas tax, we're raking about $2 to $3 million a year that goes directly into our capital program. He's right. That's what's at risk. If we don't hit that 2025 deadline, the veiled threat is that we could reasonably expect to lose some or all of that until we quote unquote get with the program.
Okay, thank you. I do see, yes, I see that. Thank you. I was going to say Mayor Kelly, Councillor Kent has had her hand up for a while, so I'm going to go to Councillor Kent and then Mayor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for Mr. Becking. I'd like to say I really did appreciate the report. I'm a bit of a finance nerd, so I read a lot of the backup pages, and I was very interested in the different methodologies you used for, I would say, depreciating or reducing the value of the assets. And it was interesting that there were multiple fashions. So that gave me a little comfort that it wasn't too discretionary, which was one of the first reactions I had was, you know, the F rating and the D rating seemed so extreme. But when I saw the backup, it was quite helpful. So I counsel everybody, if you're a bit of a finance nerd, there's some helpful information in the backup of the document. I had one simple question for you. You mentioned 18 million is what is the required number to get you to sort of a maintenance level. Can you just make sure for clarity you explain that's as compared to what in the 2024 budget? Did you say 6? And the 6 confused me because I thought our number was higher than that. So I just wanted to understand what's the 18, what's the comparison, and if it is 6, what is 6?
Okay, Madam Chair, the 6.9, which I believe is the number that Councillor Counselor is referring to is the amount of money that was spent on capital infrastructure in 2022. We set a line in the sand, if you will, at the end of 2022. So that's how much money was spent in 2022 for capital renewal. The $18 million a year is based on taking the total value of the backlog, which is 149 million and change, adding to it the accumulated needs that will be created over the next 25 years, taking the sum of those two numbers and dividing by 25. And I can give the counselor some more detail.
One follow-up for you, Mr. Becking, is the 6.9, what is that equivalent number in the 24 budget?
So I'm going to ask Director Donaldson if he is able to comment. I can see where your question was going. Welcome, Director Donaldson. Did you hear what the question was?
If you could point me to the section of the report where the 6.9 is being referred to, just to clarify for me.
So it was in Director Becking's presentation. I'm not sure if it's in the report. I think it was a separate presentation, and the 6.9 was in capital expenditures in 2022. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're looking to see what's in our 2024 budget for capital expenditures.
So I can tell you that in 2024, our total capital expenditure currently is 9.3 million. And we've done a significant increase in the last couple of years with respect to roads and bridges. I think we were talking about the impact of core infrastructure and how much that was the majority of the plan that was being contemplated. I'll just grab my paper here real quick while I'm speaking. Yeah, so we're in 2024, we're looking at 9.3 million and approximately, apologies, 1 second while I just pull this together. So, sorry. So,
Are you there, Director Donaldson?
I am.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm just trying to pull an attachment, but I would just say that we are contributing 9.3 in total capital. Some of that includes more than just public works. And the roads component is probably close to 2/3 of that. I just need to confirm that.
I don't mean to create Madam Chair, can I just clarify? Because it's not necessary that it be answered immediately, but I'll tell you what my point was. I was trying to compare the 6.9, which Director Becking said was spent on capital in 2022, to the same number in 24, just to know whether our gap is 9.3 versus 18 or 6.9 versus 18, and whether we're off by 50% or we're off by 66 or 70%. So that's how much we'd have to double to get to the maintenance level that Director Becking has presented. And I just didn't understand the numbers because I wasn't sure exactly the apples and oranges of it. We could send them back to just get me a quick answer to that. They don't have to do it right now and let everybody sit. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No, that's okay. It was a good question, so thank you. Okay, Mayor Kelly.
Thank you. And through you, I want to key off something that I heard, I think I detected with Councillor Zabit's comment. When I hear about the risk of catastrophic failure, and we will leave the subject matters unspoken, but when I read about the brown patch and how the potential for it to grow, the tendency is to think, let's just grab shovels, go fix it right now. And I'm looking at dates that run out next year and into 2025. So I'm asking you if you could give us some wisdom around the idea that the right way to do this is to plan it and to understand it and to go after it and not to panic and run around and gather a workforce.
An excellent question, Madam Chair, and my advice to you is don't go out and somehow cobble together $70 million and go and spend it at once. Don't do that. What I would suggest is that you ramp up over a period of time to alleviate that. Because if you go out and spend all that $70 million tomorrow, then I got a news flash for you. In 10 or 15 years, you're going to have to do it all over again. Only next time it won't be 70 million, it'll be more like 100 million. And you're just going to constantly be perpetuating the problem that we're facing. I would recommend to council that you adopt a measured, thoughtful approach where you're spending money on a graduated basis. That will achieve two benefits. The obvious one is that over a period of time, if you set your targets properly, you will be able to alleviate that problem and then start turning your attention to the upper part of the graph where you're spending a little bit of money that's creating a huge benefit. So you're getting more bang for whatever buck you're spending. The other thing is more from a staff perspective. It's one thing for you to say, okay, here's a check for $70 million, go and spend it. We don't have the staff resources. And quite frankly, the area doesn't have the contractor resources needed to take that and gobble it up and frankly turn it into something beneficial and useful. So I would suggest to you that yes, you need to up your game, but I would do that in a graduated way.
Thank you. Councillor Burry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's not going to come as any surprise. We're talking about roads and bridges and something we've done a little bit of work on. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to give Director Becking a bit of an ability to make a comment. We subsidize the district roads significantly as a township. And there's a huge amount of duplication of effort in roads and bridges in and around the township and district. At least one councillor today was following 4 snowplows, 2 district, 2 township, 4 in a gang in a row. So I'm just wondering, we've talked at district a little bit about rationalizing roads into a single tier and to bring the roads budget back to the township, roads and bridges, and of course the appropriate reserves to go with them. And as maybe a parting contestant gift, I'd be interested in Director Becking's thoughts around what that might do over a period of time to help us with our core infrastructure issue, given that we'd be spending our money on our district roads as opposed to subsidizing some of the other district roads.
An interesting question. As some of you may be aware, I'm a former county engineer, so I was the equivalent of the Commissioner of Engineering and Works at the district. I will say to you that despite all of its warts, the 2-tier system of governance in this province is actually a pretty good system, in my opinion. I've worked upper tier, I've worked lower tier, I've worked single tier. In terms of certain service to the public, the 2-tier system is not bad. That's the positive side. On the other side of the coin, when I look at Muskoka, I think there are far too many services and duplication at the upper tier that frankly should be at the lower tier. That's my personal opinion. But that quite frankly is a political discussion that's beyond my pay grade. So I think it's something that should be thought about. I think that there are merits to transfer over some responsibilities between the upper tier and the lower tier. There are some services, quite frankly, that are currently at the upper tier that it's the only place for them. So I think it's fundamentally healthy to have that discussion and debate. I think it would be fundamentally healthy that there be some changes, but I would be equally as strong in my arguments that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I do have a question. If I could go back to the one slide that you said is the one that has all the information we need.
Yep.
Is it possible to get that back up, Elizabeth? So for the 1/3 of the assets that are currently in the brown, and now if I may, I'm going to use the presentation we had just before you with the fire stations. There are some that we learned today are 80+ year old. There's some that are in pretty poor condition, it would seem. So they would absolutely fall into these categories, right? The brown categories.
Yes, that's correct.
When I'm looking at this chart, I see that you're saying optimally from an asset management standpoint, we should be in that orange, yellow, greens, and having a balance between those three, not heavy in one necessarily. If using again the fire station, if you are getting rid of something out of the brown category and then arguably building something new in the orange category, what does that mean from a financing standpoint? Because the one could look at the brown category and saying you're putting good money after, well, I'm using now your language, good money after bad, right? Something that you're just putting and patching and repairing.
Right.
If you look then and you're putting it into the orange category, the cost of the initial investment could be higher. Can you just explain how that scenario works?
Okay. I think if what I'm understanding the question, you're right. If you reconstruct something, regardless of what it is, it's going to move from the brown to the orange. Depending what the asset is, there may be opportunities to finance that work in ways that are not our traditional approach. Again, depending on the nature of the asset, maybe a P3 arrangement might be a suitable approach to funding that replacement. It might be debt financing. I know that councils, this one and previous, have been traditionally hesitant to go into debt financing, but debt financing can be a very useful tool if used appropriately. And this is more Mr. Donaldson's bailiwick than mine. So I'll limit my comments, but it opens up a whole host of opportunities. The other thing that it does for you is once it's up into the orange or the yellow or the green for that matter, you can then start adopting some of these more proactive maintenance and operating procedures that are going to achieve the same benefit at the end of the day, but at a much lower cost. So you're actually, the more you move up the scale, the easier you are in terms of making, being able to address the problem. But you got to get over that hump of the 70 million or whatever the final amount ends up being. You've got to get over the hump of spending all your time and all your effort slapping Band-Aids on those assets. you've got to move up the scale.
So just as a quick supplemental, that chart on the top right, by shifting an asset from the brown to the orange, opens up not only from an initial investment standpoint, financing options, but it also allows you to do the sawtooth as you described it, versus the cycle we're currently in, particularly with the assets in the brown category.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay. I now have opened up more questions, I think. Okay, Councillor Bosenworth, Mayor Kelly.
An observation, the 70 million is 11, maybe 12% of the total.
11.3.
There's another way you could look at that chart and say, you know, that's not too bad. And the second part is that those other three are very balanced, which I think means, you know, you got these little curves coming down. It's a smooth curve for us. And, you know, although that 70 million is a big number, the current budget has gone from 4 million 2 years ago to 9 million. So we're kind of halfway there.
The fire chief pointed it out. Yeah, put it back up. I'm not agreeing with you insofar as, in my opinion, we're down here. And until you deal with that problem, you'll never get up here. So what's happening, if you look at the difference, 149 versus 70, there's 79 million bucks that's sitting in that 197. It's going to end up in here. It's just a matter of time. And it's stuff like HVAC systems. They have a life of 15 years. We've got a whole bunch of them that are sitting 20, 22, 24. Right now, they're not costing us an awful lot, but I can guarantee you one of these days, they're just going to stop. And I can almost guarantee you that it'll be in the middle of February. And so I would argue that until you stop or get rid of this, you'll never get to this.
Thank you. Mayor Kelly? Sorry, Mayor Kelly, just supplemental.
Yeah, mine's a supplemental. Thank you, Chair. So of the, you know, approximate 9 million that we have in the budget, are they addressing mostly things in the brown and to the right? Thank you.
Mayor Kelly?
Thank you, and through you. Just looking for an opinion based on your experience in these things. Right now, as a district councillor, as well as township, we're seeing the impact of extraordinarily unreliable estimating and budgeting, and cost overages left, right, and center, right almost from when ground gets broken. We're looking at a huge shortage of willing contractors. We're putting out tenders and getting one bid on tens and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars worth of work. We're looking at overages astronomical, for instance, in the hospital budget, which is doubled, and we haven't even yet figured out where we're going to put it. A long-term care that was approved in July that broke ground about 2 months ago and is, I think, currently running like 70% over budget. I mean, I'm laughing, but are we in a temporary blip compounded by rising interest rates, by labor shortages, by skilled trade shortages, or is this the new norm? Because as we start looking at your numbers, is the problem become more dire the longer we wait? And I realize this is hopefully an educated guess. I'm not looking for, I'm going to hold you to it, but we're looking at a situation that deteriorates in terms of reliable estimating, availability of labor, and pricing and interest rates, perhaps, that says the longer you wait, the better off you're going to be? Or is it some urgency lock in now? Because it seems to me that right now is not a great time to be doing this kind of work.
Madam Chair, I'm going to avoid making commentary about what's going on at the district because quite frankly, I don't know the background. I don't know the history. You folks are far better informed than I. That having been said, I will speak to my experience in the last 5 years that I've been here. Muskoka is a real challenge in that there seems to be a dearth of qualified contractors. Quite frankly, in most of our tenders, we can't beg, borrow, or steal bids. If we do get bids, we get one. And you will have detected over the last few years, some of you who have been around longer than others, my hesitance to make recommendations based on receiving one bid. We've also been through almost a cataclysmic event in the last 2 or 3 years with COVID. It's had a detrimental effect on the economy. We saw inflation rates and again, Mr. Donaldson has alluded to this. I'm not talking about the 6, 7, 8% that we're seeing in the domestic or consumer price index. I'm talking about the 20 and 30% increases that we've been seeing in the construction price index. That's what I look at. Quite frankly, what's going on with the cost of milk and bread to me is almost meaningless in my world. Although there is obviously an impact, does impact on the other. I would suggest that you look back at what has been the historic practice or the historic pattern in the construction price index. Typically over the last 30 years, it's gone up 5% per annum. You know, when we were going through inflation, consumer inflation at 1 and 2%, it was still chugging on at 5 and 5.5. And quite frankly, I don't see that situation changing in the foreseeable future. So I will now give you the alternate advice, which is don't sit on your hands thinking that you're going to be able to chase the market, because you won't. You'll lose every time. So anyway, that would be my rationale.
Now is not that, it's not time to wait. Okay, committee, I would like to close off this. I have read the resolution. I wanted to give us a lot of time to absorb this because should be really noted that this has been a 5-year project since the moment Director Becking has walked through the door to get us to this point. So I have read the resolution. At this point, I'd like to ask all those in favor. Thank you. That has carried.
Madam Chair, if I could just make a final comment.
Yes, you may.
By all means, send me your comments. I really, truly am interested in understanding what you think, and just because it's Christmas doesn't mean that I won't be keeping an eye on my emails. So if you do have questions, by all means, send them through to me and I'll try and answer them as quickly as I can.
Thank you very much. Okay, 9A, a verbal presentation from our clerk.
Right.
Welcome.
I'm just not very tall. Thank you. Just a very quick presentation. A number of our staff, including our manager of Parks, Recreation and Facilities, as well as the communication advisor, have been working on developing and promoting the use of an online tool for the township website. So the community calendar can be found on the website if you go to Recreation and Leisure, and then you go to Community Calendar. This is a calendar, again, available to the public, where members of the public are able to actually submit events and programs. They're able to subscribe to the page, and that's all kind of at the top. So I'll just have this can move up a little bit. There we are. So they can subscribe, they can submit an event, they can search for different, again, programs and events that are happening. by category or doing an advanced search. So it is our hope that councillors will encourage the use of this tool. We also plan to use this calendar on your agendas to put a link under the community events. So rather than kind of updating at the table, each to be put in here by the people running the events as well. So it's just hopefully a tool that you can promote to all of your constituents. So just here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mayor Kelly, Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. And through you, a great tool, but I'm a little confused. Who can populate the event calendar? Anybody?
Yeah, so they just need to create an account. It comes through to us. We take a look at it and then upload it. Yeah.
I can just imagine what would come in unfiltered.
Yes, staff do take a look at it.
Good clarification. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. And through you to the clerk. I wonder if we could get the header of the website back up again on the screen. I get an awful lot of phone calls and I do a lot of directing of people to our website because I think it's an underutilized tool and I want them to become as familiar as they possibly can. So at that top heading with those 4 categories, to me, it's intuitive. To many, it isn't. And of course, there's all those subcategories. I'm wondering if there's any way to take those 4 categories and somehow do a more general subheading. So it's, as soon as you get on there, you land on it. It says our community, what it is. Generally, for example, town hall, we know what it is, but most of the public have not got a clue what a town hall is. So there you find council and agendas and meetings and et cetera. So just, I don't know, it just might be a handy, I would find it as recommending to people that they can get on there and it's very directional, might help. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. If I may, those are great comments. And we've actually looked at kind of revamping the website as a project that we could do into 2024, into 2025. That's all going to be coming through to you in the communication strategy, which you'll see in Q1, where you'll be able to kind of give us a sense of what your priorities are when it comes to communication. And looking at our website, it will be one of them.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So just for our clarity, when we get to the future community events update, today it's on our agenda for people to, but moving forward, we are trying to encourage everybody to actually put their items onto the calendar. Great. Thank you. Okay, moving on now to our new business. I want to go back to the delegations we had this morning. Oh, you had something before that, Councillor Roberts?
Yes, Madam Chair, my apologies. So that's good for all of us to hear it, but as a hall board chair, we've got to get the out to the hall boards and say, because they're the people that will populate it. Thank you.
Thank you. 12A. We heard earlier today a delegation from Mr. Allerton around cannabis. I would like to read the resolution and then I will open up the discussion. Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Roberts, whereas committee received a delegation request, the township consider approving retail cannabis stores in the township of Muskoka Lakes. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to review the proposal and report back on potential next steps and implications for the township. So essentially what we would be doing is asking for, I'm assuming it's Mr. Cox would be coming back with a report for us then to discuss at that time. So at this point, questions or comments? Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. So, and how I'm seeing this report coming back is basically the locations of where they can't be because of schools and I'm not sure where this falls in, and I don't know that I need an answer today, but arenas, community centers, that type of thing. What I don't know all the regulations.
Okay.
But I guess that's all we're going to get back because what I understood from the presentation as well as our community in general, there are only 2 like either Port Carling or Bala. So essentially that's what we would be taking into consideration where they're prohibited by the Ontario government.
I would imagine that would be included in the report. I believe it was, did you have your hand up? Okay, Councillor Kent and then Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. Just for a new councillor history here, obviously this was turned down at some point. Could somebody tell me what, why we turned it down? Number one. Number two is, are there retail cannabis stores in either Gravenhurst or Bracebridge? I would be in favor of this. I think that they're very well protected and secure when you go to a location in Toronto. But I'm looking forward to getting a report at some point.
Yeah, I think that this report is going to help address that. That's why this direction is here today, to give all of us the same level of understanding.
Yeah.
Yep.
Does anyone, what's the history? If you could just give me 2 seconds, why did we turn it down when we did, obviously?
So that's going to be included in the report.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that everybody has the same information, because it has been multiple points. So, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. The reason it was turned down before is we could not regulate them at all. In other words, it was, I think the province would give us money towards it if we license them. We turned that down. Now we don't get anything if they come in. So that's why it was turned down the second time. And the problem is with it, as the report said this morning, of about 1,700 applications. If an application comes in and it meets the province's standard, we're stuck with it if we bring this through. So this is the problem. That's why I will not be supporting it. I think we're just wasting staff time, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to remind everybody that what we're asking is for staff to come back with a report that gives us the history to respond to Councillor Kent's comment, because there's not a few people around this table who haven't got any of this context or background. And also some of the parameters, as Councillor Nishikawa is bringing up, as to what we could consider. We're not making a decision today one way or the other. We're simply asking staff to come back and put this back in the table with in the form of a report. So Mayor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you. I certainly don't want anybody guessing why I voted no. So it was turned down because more people voted against it than voted for it. That's plain and simple the only answer. Nobody took a poll of my decision. And I resent the fact that we're going to classify it as one reason or another. I had a reason at the time. Good news. I probably don't have that reason anymore.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I just wanted to respond to Sally's question about what happens in our other municipalities. I can tell you that there were 6 locations in Gravenhurst, in teeny tiny downtown Gravenhurst, 6 locations. 2 of them have now closed. And there you go. There may be that many less. But the same in Gravenhurst, there were multiple, they're slowly closing, I would say, and also, but you should be aware, if you're not aware, Councillor Kent, that certainly the Bala area is serviced by WADA. And then there's a whole tax thing that comes into play as well, but that's not, and of course we would not be benefiting from the provincial government for the sales from WADA.
Okay. So I'm assuming Mr. Cox has been listening closely to all of our questions today, and that a lot of these items will be in his forthcoming report if we choose to vote on this. So Councillor Zavitz, do you have something?
I do. Thank you. And through you to you. Yes, it's been disapproved, if you will, twice in the past council. I thought it was important to bring it up again as many issues face us in 2024. I'd be really disappointed if at least we did not challenge staff to come back with all the information for people like Councillor Kent and others who this is their first time facing this. And I just think we look like a smarter, more informed council or committee in this case, if we embrace the staff coming back with fulsome information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think I know where your vote is. I'd like to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Is carried. Mr. Cox, we look forward to hearing your report. The next item was, we heard from our snowmobiles group who have patiently sat here through today. Okay, so our clerk staff have actually drafted a resolution. I would like to read this and then we can open up for conversation. Moved by Councillor Bosenworth, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that staff be directed to facilitate discussions with the Muskoka Lake Snow Trails Association in regards to asks made during their presentation, and that staff report back to committee with the outcome of the discussions. Okay, any other?
Yeah.
Well, I am asking all that. I like everything. I would like to give anybody else a chance to speak. Okay, Councillor Bosenworth.
I think that's a fabulous idea and we should get on with it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none? All those in favor? I know you are trying really hard, Mayor Kelly. Okay, District of Muskoka, Mayor Kelly, Councillor Edwards, Nishikawa, and Burry. Nope, Mayor Kelly, please.
Thank you. And through you, probably the most notable from my perspective was a decision to find $30 million in capital available to the Muskoka Housing Task Force 2.0, which I chair, to allow us to dig some holes and plant some houses. And that's a huge step. We have debated, we've investigated, we've turned every piece of paper long before I got put on district council. But we were hampered by the fact that committing resources to supporting the proposed developments just didn't happen. I believe it's certainly, as chair of the group, I will tell you that my intention is to look at and invest in all manner of opportunities to create everything from emergency shelter for homeless and victims of abuse and so forth, all the way to the spectrum of kind of first tier purchase, attainable and affordable homes for purchase, rental along the way, backyard suites. I will be determined that it will impact positively all 6 municipalities, not just the typical Gravenhurst, Bracebridge and Huntsville corridor. It will come to Georgian Bay, it'll come to Muskoka Lakes, and it'll come to Lake of Bays. And I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to actually get stuff moving. There's a huge urgency. It's not going away. I hope we're going to surprise a few people with an approach or two that we're looking at that is a little out of the box and a little bit out of the ordinary. And it will involve private relationships. I do not believe that the government has any business doing the investing and carrying the properties. I think we should be facilitating land assembly. We should be facilitating or repurposing of unused municipal lands from all 6 jurisdictions. And so it's a big, wide open, creative field. And we now have $30 million committed to helping the cause.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards. Oh, Councillor Nishikawa, question.
Well, sorry, more of a comment. So also though, Chair, we are also asking our municipality to bring forward any lands that they are aware of, not just municipal properties, but if you're aware of any other potential opportunities, to bring them forward to us, because we need some more creative ways of doing things.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. Try and keep it brief. They love Muskoka, sustain Muskoka from the Discovery Center in Gravenhurst. It asked for $100,000. That will be coming out of reserves. The William Davis Great Lakes Education Research Center, it asked for $50,000. That'll again be coming out of reserves. The early learning and childhood workforce, there is just was a verbal report and there's a funding increase. What else we got here? And that is just about it. They are looking into some fees and that tariff increases. That will be just changing some of the schedules they will be going up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I had hoped Alan had brought this up, but our OP got passed.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big one, right? That was a very big one. So I'm just saying that. Again, health services, we're really focusing on the expenses at our long-term care homes and all of the other challenges about staffing, et cetera. I wanted to just quickly mention that we had put on hold for a time our new paramedic station. My understanding from last verbal discussion I had with one of the directors is that in fact that will be moving forward now. Those of you that knew that they actually are calling it Glen Orchard, but it's essentially now down by Brent's Pit in that location. So we'll be getting a new ambulance station, as well as there's a whole new model of deployment for paramedics, and we'll be adding that level of service and pointing out the importance that the paramedic services bring, and what we're hoping for in more for Muskoka Lakes is that sort of aftercare service that they provide, which essentially is paramedics will be able to visit those members that just got out of the hospital, that type of thing, and stop the reoccurrence of them having to go back to hospital for some of those items. That's been very, very popular, just not a huge opportunity in Muskoka Lakes yet because we're just that much further geographically not available, I guess. So that is coming forward. I did want to mention something else about the Bill Davis Center because I think this is a very, very exciting opportunity for Muskoka Lakes in particular. And look into it. I would just suggest other councillors because it's going to be it's a new education platform that will be within our backyard in Georgian Bay for science related issues. So I just think that it's a very exciting thing to have better understanding of good things coming to the province.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I thought the mayor might have said something about the official plan, given the histrionics that was brought on by several district councillors over just one item that we felt very strongly as a community, which was all about the aggregates and how we've been able to manage for the last 50 years, having them 2 kilometers back, but now all of a sudden they have to be 500 meters was just absolutely beyond me. And having folks that are not associated with our township trying to derail the passing of that official plan was disturbing, and I hope that what goes around comes around, because they've got all official plans coming back, and maybe we can send it back for referral because we didn't have time to read it. I'm being entirely sarcastic. It is part of my repertoire. So in finance and corporate services, obviously we're concerned about budget, and it is budget time. So there's lots going on that will be likely passed on Monday. The committee also deals with things like OPP. So there's a multi-page document that comes through every quarter. Service level changes come through ours, and the district continues to want to add headcount, and there's been a fair bit of pushback on headcount. Some temporary stuff is good, but every headcount, adds significant dollars, of which we get the absolute privilege of being able to pay 40% of it. So we did talk about some service level changes. There's some asset retirement obligation policy stuff that went on, which is all good things around asset management and the asset management plan for the district. Tax policy and long-term financial planning. There's some indexing around inflation and quarterly investment reports that we looked at, and the district is doing quite well. on that standpoint. And then the rest of the time was spent on the draft budget and the ins and outs of where they're coming from and shuffling things around. And if I was in Vegas, I'd call the budget a shell game, but I'm not in Vegas, so I'm going to call it a budget.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Kelly, did you want to comment on the OP? Because
and through you, Madam Chair, yeah, I do. In fact, I would like to point out that I would have mentioned the OP had I remembered that we didn't do that last month. For some reason, I thought it was more than a month ago. Just feels like it, but thank you for raising it.
Yeah, I actually was thinking the same thing because I think we've had meetings in between, which is what's confused the matter. We've had a lot on the go. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you, Councillor Nishikawa mentioned this, and it brought back an earlier question I think I had relating to our fire chief, and that relates to first responders, so paramedics, response time versus our township volunteer response time. Do those settle up? Are they in some sort of parallel? Is there a different criteria, or maybe the public would be interested in knowing if you know that comparison, if you will?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I'm not going to act like I know all of the ins and outs of the paramedic piece, but I understand in the past they had a metric that measured more that they were called to start to respond rather than an actual metric where they had to respond. But I do know that they record the data of how long it takes for them to respond, and they use that data to inform other dispatches to other agencies that are tiered in an arrangement with them. So that's what we do. So for example, if they know that one of their ambulances is tied up and it's going to be more than 15 minutes till they can get to a certain area, then they will ask that fire will attend. But as council was shown earlier, some of our response times are about that 15-minute mark. So a lot of times we arrive and we make patient contact and ensure that the patient is okay for about a couple minutes, and then ambulance attends. But we do record that information about who arrives first for the data gathering for this body. So you can make decisions based on that. And just for committee's benefit, we are having conversations right now about our tiered medical arrangement with paramedic services. So I hope to bring some sort of agreement to this table maybe in about May or June. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a good update. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Moving on now to 12D, our community events update. Next month, this will be on the calendar, but this month, if anybody has any that they'd like to bring forward, please do. Councillor Roberts.
It's not only, I believe, Madam Chair, it's an update. So it may have already passed. So that's what I'm giving an update. Okay. It is that on Saturday, the Milford Bay Community Center, we had the annual Christmas event with Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus, and Jam Sandwich was there, but the attendance there was amazing. It was well over 100 individuals that attended and enjoyed, and all got gifts. All the children got gifts. So just it's great. And I know that we had the same thing in other communities, but just to let you know about Milford Bay, it was jammed, and they really appreciate seeing the new speaker system and video devices that have been installed, not operating yet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So they look forward to next year's budget when it can start operating. Is that sorry? Sorry. Okay. Councillor Bosenworth.
Yes, just on our very active Peninsula Community Center, there was weekly euchre in the evening. There's yoga twice a week. The Mettones, I think they've already had their concert, and the seniors meet monthly. So, and then there's some regular Lions meeting going on there as well. And I will speak to the Hall Committee, and we'll see if we can get those things on the new improved calendar. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councilor Misher? No? Okay. Anybody else? Any comments? I think you guys are hungry. And this is my reminder, which is I was being reminded that we do have our staff lunch downstairs today in the lunchroom. So just confirming that location right after today's meeting and before we have council. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. That's good news. We are currently at 12 o'clock. So I will read our Motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that this meeting adjourn at 12 p.m. And the next regular meeting at the General Finance Committee will be held on Tuesday, January 16th, 2024 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair electronically from the Council Chambers Municipal Office in Port Carling, Ontario. All those in favor? Thank you. That carries. And thank you very much, committee. We'll see you back here at 1.